of what has been won thanks to our victory, what has been enshrined in the UN Charter and created on the outcome of the Second World War. Our adversaries, other states whose list, it's not surprising, coincides with those who vote against the combating glorification of Nazism, neo-Nazism and other practices that contribute to fueling contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia and related intolerance resolution. They vote against it. Liberal dictatorships that have not accepted the loss of their colonies and want to put obstacles to the development of multipolar world. This blossoming garden, surrounded allegedly by wild jungle, formulated by Brussels, is just reincarnation aimed at this racial superiority of the Nazi nightmare. The European Union that is smeared in brown spots. It's militarizing like the Third Reich used to do it, preparing for the Third World War, not concealing it and calling our country an enemy. It's obvious they have not learned the lessons of history. Russia had to start the special military operation in order not to allow to turn Ukraine into a platform for neo-Nazi military operations. The man-hating ideology will be uprooted and the aims of our special military operation will be achieved. It's our duty before the winners in the great patriotic war. Now I would like to tell you about the Russian diplomats, the Russian foreign ministry daily and for many years literally working in historical issues and brings the true international law into foreign relations forged by the heroes of the Great Patriotic War. I would like to mention the preparations for the coming holiday, Victory Day, the 9th of May, abroad. In the accounts by Foreign Ministry in social media, we continue and we are doing that on a daily basis to tell you about the history of the Great Patriotic War, the feat of the Red Army soldiers. It's the colossal role played by the Soviet Union in the liberation of Europe and the entire world from this man-hating ideology. Just the product of Western European civilization, the Nazi plague. In Russian, English and other languages, materials about the key stages of the Great Patriotic War are published, about the heroes. Based on the archive evidence, we tell you about the crimes of the Nazis on occupied territories, about genocide of Soviet people conducted by them. We do that not only for our competitors, but also for and together with the peoples of our brother republics and now sovereign states. We do not divide this information. These documents, these archive materials are not ours, they are our common evidence, because the feat of the Soviet people, it is the common feat. In many countries, Russian diplomats and competitors hold memorable events. They do not allow to keep silent about the truth about the victory. And the pseudo-historical truth they are trying to promote somewhere now. There have been the Immortal Regiment marches in many cities. Thousands of people participated in them. Despite provocation in a number of states of the so-called collective West, This event has already been held in more than 30 countries. In some cities, it has been the first time since a pause caused by the pandemics and the manifestations of Russophobia. In Busan, for example, in South Korea, it was the first Immortal Regiment procession since 2019. They try to somehow conceal historical fakes. They just express their hatred in many ways. Just imagine, diplomats just equal the Soviet Union, from where their great-grandfathers originated. They equal it to the Third Reich. It's just treason towards their ancestors, or it's just the descendants of Nazis. They cannot be called diplomats because diplomacy should be based on international law and historical facts. It just can cause disgust, sincere disgust. As the head of the Kiev Junta, Zelensky, his fathers, great-grandfathers, they fought for the Soviet Union, for our common motherland. They fought against Hitlerites, Hitlerite occupants and criminals. What would their ancestors say now? Looking into their eyes, just looking at their descendants for their personal benefits, just denigrating our common past, and denigrating our common history. So this published material, they're just deceitful, and arguments are presented by us against them, and where the monuments to liberators are still standing, and where the cemeteries of Soviet soldiers have not still been destroyed. They have memorable events have been held. We honored our heroes in more than 40 countries with the direct participation of Russian diplomats. In memory of the victory, tons of trees have been planted and even small alleys have been created. In India, Indonesia, Israel, Bulgaria, Portugal, and many other countries, the school children and children of our competitors participated in memorable events like Windows of Victory and the Candle of Memory. There was also this Songs of Victory initiative. There were concerts held in many countries where our beloved wartime songs were performed. Songs literally banned in Ukraine now, but it's the music that links the generations. It's the sincere songs coming from the heart, have been written by real soldiers. It's the truth about the good and the evil, about the fate of the people, about the human fates of our mothers, grandmothers. The descendants of the Nazis are trying just to distort that, to erase this memory. Their efforts are not successful, I would like to say. We will not allow that in Paris, in Vienna, in Tirana, the Turecki choir and soprano performed those songs, and local audience, they just enjoyed those songs, and our competitors, and the Turecki choir concert has been broadcast. It's the second performance of the Turecki choir there. The songs are posted on the internet. They are shared for someone you know, some foreign friends, and Russia also participates in this initiative. We publish comments on the songs of the Great Patriotic War. We also post videos for those songs. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia supports this initiative. And now our president will now launch in the Telegram the digital program in Russian and English, the so-called rounds with records of 20 most well-known victory songs. Please listen to them, please share them. Such audio visual messages. People from all over the world demonstrate a colossal interest towards the 80th anniversary of the victory and the historical truth. You can study that in the Foreign Ministry accounts. The information is uploaded on a daily basis, and there will be links in the text of the briefing. Please follow us. You can see a lot of very interesting events held by our foreign missions. It's not only the events in which Russian diplomats participate in the context of the 80th anniversary of the victory. There is also analytical work connected with this memorable date. It's been a report prepared on the shadow of Nazism covering Europe again. It has been it's about the glorification of Nazism. It's spreading the several different forms of Nazism. In jubilation 80 years ago, people thought that Nazism is finished. Nazism was finished, but such a high price, the highest price has been paid for this fight against Nazism. But it was just the head of this ominous iceberg. The entire Nazism needed to be destroyed, but actually, as we see now, it was just its visual part, the part of the iceberg above the water. But its roots, its nurturing ground, and the part under the water, it has been preserved. And now Nazism is raising its head, mostly in Europe, in Western Europe. Our report is based on information of human rights organizations, intergovernmental organizations. We study in detail the actions of the so-called collective West to support the Nazi Kiev regime and specific NATO countries, mostly Baltic states, Poland and some other countries, motivated by anti-Russia sentiments, having lost the remains of some historical memory, they just continue to destroy the Soviet heritage on their territory and intensify the work to falsify history on the history of the Second World War. Some representatives of political science, even historians, they just play along, unfortunately, because history has not taught them anything. The man-hating ideology is not just glorification of this horrible Nazism ideology. It's just creating the basis for its propagation. Our country has suffered enormous losses as a result of the Second World War, has destroyed Nazi representatives in Europe. It will never allow to forget the lessons of the past, to distort the historical truth, including the liberation of Eastern Europe and Central Europe countries. The liberation that has been the result of common efforts by anti-Hitler coalition. I appeal to journalists, political scientists, historians. Please study this report. It's available in Russian and English. Share your assessments, maybe some materials. Possibly we will use them in the development of the next report. Now some events with the participation of Foreign Ministry. There has been an exhibition without the right to forget. This exhibition has been prepared on the order of the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, within the framework of Victory Day celebration. It's about the crimes of the Nazis, their collaborators against civilians, the Russian archives, the Russian Ministry of Culture, Russian Historical Museum, and Historical Society participated, with the participation of Defense Ministry, Foreign Ministry, Federal Security Service, Federal Guard Service, Foreign Intelligence Service of the Russian Federation, and Foreign Minister Lavrov has greeted the participants in the exhibition. More than 1,200 exhibits have been presented in its collection. Thematical blocks have been formed with the most important museum and memorial items that vividly reflect the decisive contribution of the multinational Soviet people in the victory over Nazi Germany, and tell about the great feat and the victims by the Soviet people during the liberation of the world from Nazis.
Но роли отечественной дипломатии в достижении
Special attention is given to the role of the Russian diplomacy in the victory. There's materials of the archive of the foreign policy of the Russian Federation. There's a draft address of the then People's Commissar for Foreign Affairs of the USSR, Vyacheslav Molotov, to the Soviet people on the day one of the Great Patriotic War. Central place belongs to the original act on capitulation, enshrining the ultimate defeat of the Nazi Germany. This exhibition gives the opportunity to the guests to see the memorabilia of those years, to feel the pulse of the military era, and to realize the greatness of the people victoire. It will be open until August 25th. And on the street that is close to our ministry, will host a photo exhibition dedicated to the Soviet diplomacy during the Great Patriotic War. Guests will be able to see the documents and photos reflecting important stages of work of the People's Commissariat for Foreign Affairs of the USSR during the years of the war. These materials show the activities of our ministry to establish anti-Hitler coalition. This exhibition will give an opportunity to people and guests of Moscow to see how the activities of Russian diplomats contributed to the defeat of Nazism. The exhibition was prepared by the Department of State Protocol and Historical and Documentary Department of the Ministry, with the support of the Department of Culture of the City of Moscow. All the materials were given by the archives of foreign politics of the Russian Federation. Now, about the modern fight with Nazism, about the Ukrainian crisis. At midnight, from May 7th to 8th, the 72-year truce on the 80th anniversary of the Great Victory, declared by Russian President Vladimir Putin on April 28th, come into effect. I'll remind you, on May 3rd, Zelensky publicly refused to support these initiatives, saying that this initiative is not serious, but it's more serious to kill their own people, isn't it, Zelensky? The Ukrainian army did not stop firing during Easter he violated the ceasefire regime about 5,000 times. In March, April, they violated a 30-day moratorium on energy strikes 136 times. Moratorium is not serious enough, it seems. Zelensky doesn't have any sacred anymore. He abused the memory of his own grandfather, holder of 2 orders of the Red Star, Semyon Zelensky. Now the leader of the Kiev regime abuses the living veterans, those veterans who lived until the 80th anniversary of the victory and who want to participate in the celebrations on the Victory Day on April 29th and May the 3rd. Zelensky de facto threatened to commit terror attacks during the parade in Moscow. He said that he cannot guarantee security to those who is going to come to Moscow. When he realized that, yet again, he made a fool of himself, Zelensky, in a manner typical of him, tried to put the blame on who? On Russia, of course, who ostensibly is interested, according to Zelensky, to accuse the Kiev regime of it. But wait a minute, it was the Kiev regime that after every strike on the civilian facility, after every killings, say that it's their responsibility. So who puts the blame on anyone? The government in Ukraine always confirmed their participation in the implementation of these terror attacks. But isn't it us who put any blame on the Kiev regime? No, it's the Kiev regime who confirmed in the killings of Russian journalists and striking on civilian infrastructure and attempts to destroy of the Crimean Bridge. There's a saying, a thief can't hide his guilty feeling. But in case of Zelensky, this feeling is really huge. On April 29th, the real designs of the neo-Nazi regime was aired by the Secretary of the Committee of the Verkhovna Rada on National Security, Roman Kostenko. During the air, he said that Ukraine has capabilities to simply strike on the Russian parade. But this is the direct words of those who holds the power in Kiev. It's their direct quote. In case there is an order, such operation can be designed. The leader of the SBU, Vasily Maluk, said that the Zelensky want to destroy the Crimean Bridge. The international terrorists, look what they turned the Victory Day into. As a sign of Nazi solidarity, the EU countries want to have an informal meeting of foreign ministers on May the 9th. One can think that it's not that bad, but where? In Lvov. The choice of the city, with rampant aggressive Ukrainian nationalism, whose authorities fight against tombs of Soviet soldiers, is quite symbolic. The participants is also important. They want to make a certain impression on the European Russophobes and inspire them to support the Zelensky regime. The main aim of the meeting is to try and stop the celebrations in Russian, but they understand that these plans are absurd. Now about the decommunization in Ukraine. The veterans of the Great Patriotic War who live in Ukraine are recommended. I would like to say this with, I need some courage to say this out loud. They recommend the veterans to hide the awards, those very awards for the victory, for fighting, for heroic deeds during the Great Patriotic War, on the inner side of their jackets, in order not to confuse the sensitive looks of the locals. They don't say that they are Russophobes, but it is clear that they are. What is this? How can we call this? This is a conscious abuse. This is an attempt to degrade people. These guidelines were worked out in the institution of the National Memory of Ukraine. They said that the Soviet ordnance and medals should be worn in the correct way. De facto, it is prohibited. But after writing history, the Kiev demands not to keep the heroes in the shadow. They want to destroy themselves, not to show themselves, not to have the courage to show those words and orders. It is clear that memory of those who saved the world from the Nazism makes them fear. On May the 8th, May the 8th marks the 60 years since a directive was adopted about the title, the Hero City. This title was given for to Soviet cities where people showed mass heroism and courage during the Great Patriotic War. Today in Ukraine, neo-Nazis abuse important sites, but they cannot destroy the memory about the people who courageously fought in the war, who destroyed the Hitler Germany in Stalingrad and in other battles. Today, Russia yet again fights the Nazism in Ukraine. There's no doubt that we will do this. Kiev and Odessa will yet again be called hero cities. I once went to Mexico. It was a private visit and happened quite a lot of time ago. And not far from Mexico, and we went there to see some local museums. The guides said we should go to the suburbs and to see the pyramids. And this the Teotihuacan complex was indeed very good, and it's in the heart of Mexico. And we couldn't believe it when we came there. They're huge. They make up a whole complex, and it turns out that they were discovered not long ago, about 20 years ago. And I asked myself how such things can happen, that huge things that can be compared to modern skyscrapers can be forgotten. And people who didn't go anywhere from the region can forget about them. It's been about 15, 16 years since then, and now I do understand how humanity can forget whole cities and pages of their history, and the example of Ukraine. In our eyes, the history of hero cities are being forgotten, but I'm sure that in future they will be reopened. But we'll do even more. We will prevent the forgetting of the history of these cities. On May the 2nd, 2014, 11 years ago, Ukrainian Nazis killed in the trade union's house in Odessa dozens of innocent people who did not agree to the seizure of power in Kiev. Do you remember back then that the anti-people junta and their sponsors with power destroyed the legitimacy in Ukraine? People in Odessa protested. They decided, with the cost of their own lives, to say no to this. 48 people lost their lives back then. It didn't happen 80 years ago. It happened 11 years ago. It's the newest history. It's the modern history. We all remember this. But not everyone remembers this. 48 people were burned alive. It happened in 2014, not in 2014, and not 2014 before our era. It is 2014 of our era. The first part of the 21st century, 48 people were burned alive. Indeed. Every time we say that with pain we remember those tragic events. And every time we are going to talk that those guilty of this mass killing weren't punished. The Kiev regime, despite new information about that crime, continue to cover up those who were guilty. But the main question goes not to them, not to the Kiev regime, whether it is those who threw out the legitimate representatives of the Ukraine from their cabinet, Yatsenyuk and others. It's not the question to Poroshenko, who came after that and did everything not to investigate this crime. It's not the question to Zelensky, but although he promised to bring order into this matter, but it is a question to those who year after year said that human rights are sacred, that they are the basis of the development of the economy, finance, the culture, who looked at everything through human rights, who did not forget any cases that where they saw the violation of human rights. But where are those human rights institutions now? And those representatives of the Western public society. Now we know that they only received money from the USAID agency. Where were you back then, 11 years ago? You did not demand the investigation, not simply of the killing of people, but to sacrificing these people to neo-Nazism. new Nazism. The Kiev regime continues the terror against the Russian region, against civilians. In the night on April 28th, Ukrainian Nazis started the drone attack against civilian facilities. The Russian air defense systems put down 102 out of 115 drones. A civilian was killed, a woman was wounded. From April the 29th through May 6th, at least 4 people were wounded. On May the 4th, the Strela factory was damaged in the village of Sezamka. On May the 1st, the Ukrainian soldiers with drones made a terror attack on the market in the village of Aloshki.
8 people died and 20 were injured. On 24th of April, the UAV strike in the village of Mokroy Orlovka in the Belgorod region resulted in the death of a local chair of the Electoral Commission, Svetlana Tymoshenko, and the injury of her sister. The drone attacks, as you know, when I was in school, back in school and at the university, I read poetry dedicated to the Great Patriotic War. Valia Valentina. Now, this is what is happening right now that we have to deal with, our country has to deal with. But this complete lawlessness and cynicism of the West, they will have to pay for that. Someone will pay with, as it should be, in accordance with the corresponding laws, and we will be talking about this in more detail. And some in the West perhaps would have to answer a bit later, but they'll have to pay with seeing a generation growing of those who don't care about the ancestry and the history. A generation of those who will be not able to distinguish a truth from lies, who will not be able to protect their own countries, they will not be able to respect their own countries, and will have no love for their countries. As a result of this UAV attacks against a civilian sector, a car and a bus in other villages from April 25 to 4th of May, 4 civilians were killed and 15 were injured. On April 24th, the Banderites deliberately targeted the holy site in the Belgorod region with the UAV wooden temple complex New Jerusalem in the village of Sukharevo. They used the UAVs to prevent the Emercom officers and Russian servicemen and local volunteers, to bar them from trying to extinguish the flame. You know that there have been a lot of artistic pieces and documentaries about the Second World War, about atrocities committed, and that's the same thing that Nazis have been committing. On April 27, the UAVs from Ukraine struck a school in the village of Peshchanoe and a butter factory, an oil factory in the village of Sloboda in the Kiev regime. The school was set on fire and 1 person was injured. On 30th April, the UAVs from the AFU attacked a civilian district and a building of a kindergarten. On the 4th and 5th of May, the UAVs resulted in deaths of 2 people and injuries of 5 people. On 27th of April in Gorlovka, the shelling with the use of large caliber artillery resulted in the death of a civilian and 6 people were injured. And on 29th of April, 17 people were injured, including a 4-month-old child and 5 internal ministry officers. And 9th of 2nd May, the UAV attacks against the city of Rilsk resulted in injuries of 3 people and further injuries of another 3. In the Novorossiysk and Krasnodar Krai, the strikes resulted in the injuries of 5 people, including 2 children. On the 3rd of May, the Ukrainian terrorists tried to strike the Crimean infrastructure with missiles, using 8 Storm Shadow missiles and 3 Neptune anti-ship missiles. On the Black Sea, 33 crewless unmanned boats were used in an attack. All those boats have been destroyed by the Russian armed forces, and everything will result in a punishment. Russian courts continue to sentence Ukrainian neo-Nazis and mercenaries for their war crimes and other atrocities. Andrei Zhurba and Anatoly Marmaza, the AFU militants, received 16 years in prison each. They mined roads and prevented the evacuation of peaceful Persia from the Kursk region. They have been in absentia sentences in regards to foreign mercenaries from Azerbaijan, Belgium, and Sweden. Gassar Analogly Mamedov, Maxim Roger Genry Barat, and Tobias Enquist. They have been sentenced to 14 years in prison each. All three have been declared, international search has been declared for all three. A 9-year sentence was issued to the Colombian mercenary Miguel Angel Montilla Cardenas, who was captured by Russian forces in 2024. He accepted the blame. The Ukrainian Nazis are still continuing to identify themselves with their ideological predecessors from the Third Reich. Of course, there's proof of that. On the 26th of April, the militants of the Karpatskaya Sech Battalion published an invitation to the celebration on the occasion of the creation of the detachment, depicting the head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, and other Hitlerites. In Lvov, there have been manifestations in the framework of the yearly glorification of the SS Galician division. One of the posters featured the photographs of 2 German Nazis in the period of the Second World War. One of the pictures was taken during the Kiev offensive in 1941, and second in the Ardennes in the Battle of the Bulge in 1944. We see the the telling example of glorification of the German Nazis and the collaborators from the Ukrainian rebel army, which has been deemed extremist in the Russian Federation. Those people have been capable of killing hundreds of thousands innocent Ukrainians, Russians, Poles, Jews, and other ethnicities. The modern Banderites, in their hatred and in the cruelty, have surpassed the ancestors and their idols. But those are not just separate problems. Those are the problems that, in concert, are one large global problem. We see new testaments of overwhelming corruption, the all echelons of the Kiev regime. There's been a scandal that more than 20 officers of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine pointed out that in their declaration on incomes that they had huge proceeds in cryptocurrencies on their electronic wallets, the majority of which have been discovered as non-existent. Perhaps they have not been just trying to be more honest than they actually are, but the Ukrainian journalists think that these are the clumsy attempts to legalize the stolen proceeds, primarily from among the money that has been supplied by the West to Ukraine. And this has all been going under the pretext of fighting corruption. And against this backdrop, the government of Ukraine refused to increase paychecks, to increase salaries to teachers, justifying it by the lack of possibility to send budgetary funds, which have been all sent for security and defense. Which kind of defense are we talking about when we see Zelensky regime killing their own citizens? The Kiev regime, for the sake of its own enrichment, is trying to extort money from Ukrainians, deeming them to poverty. And some of them have been running abroad, where, if lucky, they will be able to leave the country, but then they will be immediately prosecuted by the representative of the Kiev regime, and so on and so forth. And this all is part of the overarching plot where we see the Russian language cancelled in Ukraine. They've been boasting that there are almost no children in school And perhaps this will be a point where there will be no children at school at all in Ukraine. They've been boasting that there have been no children in Ukraine studying Russian language. Currently, they say that around 345 people have been studying Russian and 109 people have been studying it as a foreign language. Such data was presented by an ombudsman on the protection of the state language, Taras Kremen, on the 1st of May. According to him, there have been around 100,000 children in 2021 studying Russian language, and soon he boasted that there wouldn't be a single one. Just I'm curious if someone will be interested in studying Russian language, and for this, for the sake of statistic, would he be physically exterminated to keep the statistic beautiful in the eyes of the Kiev regime? This, of course, will be mentioned later. And this achievement is being appropriated by this language ombudsman, who has been openly claiming to seek re-election after July, when his mandate runs out. In the conditions when the Russophobia in Ukraine is the main basis of state policy and has been cultivated in Ukrainian society, we see unusual characters emerging, such as Ukrainian actor Bogdan Benyuk, who in a live broadcast called for hitting children for speaking Russian. That he told that you could hit the minors if they speak Russian, and you could hit, and when it comes to seniors, you could simply hit them in the head with a bottle. Well, an artist, perhaps as a person emerging from a cultural background, should bring culture to the masses, but on the other hand, he's demonstrating his anti-culture, his lack of education, and he just demonstrates what is the real culture in Ukraine, which has been transformed and twisted under the state propaganda. This is a telling example of this brainwashing that we see when a person born and raised in the USSR, who was cast in the Soviet and Russian films, has been transformed under the influence of propaganda. Bogdan Benuk perhaps is sticking to the principle, money doesn't smell. Perhaps in Ukraine money truly doesn't smell. Some people in Ukraine, for example, Zelensky, truly do smell something in Ukraine. The actor was also asked what about his own son, what was he doing, and he answered that he wasn't really in a hurry to give the duty to the motherland. Remember the case of Kuleba? He said the same, that he gave all to Ukraine, but at the time he was living in Central Europe and he had a new home. We see all those photos of Ukrainian officials and former Ukrainian officials enjoying the lavish lifestyle, and the citizens of Ukraine are trying to seek answers, so why he abandoned them. And all those who left don't care about them. The members of the ruling regime are acting precisely in that manner. They are sending people to the slaughter, and they are hiding their own children in universities or abroad, or are just or inventing legends about them. Another comedian is very famous in Ukraine. He also was cast in Russian films. He was friends with colleagues in Russia. He supported the Russian language. And for the sake of money, he betrayed the memory of his veteran grandfather. He usurped the authority in Ukraine and turned Ukraine into an Nazi quasi-state, and is ready to sacrifice millions of Ukrainians for his own safety. His name is Vladimir Zelensky. The enumerated facts confirm the relevance of the special operation and denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine, and the elimination of threats emanating from territory, and as was stated by our leadership, all those goals will be achieved. And the head of the office of the office of the President of Ukraine, Mr. Yermak, took another attempt to rewrite history. He tried to write a history of the Second World War, and what he told us was completely puzzling. He published materials. Can't really believe that a person could come up with that, but it is nevertheless true that 16% of the Soviet division allegedly were formed and staffed by Ukrainians, and hundreds of thousands of those people were storming Berlin in 1945. After the war, the territory of Ukraine, during the war, Ukraine was a basis for the Russian war effort, and that the Soviet Union wouldn't be able to survive without Lend-Lease, without fuel, without logistics, and the armor lists for the T-34 tanks were manufactured in the United States, and the half of Russian bread were supplied from abroad. That is according to the nonsense spewed by Yermak. And according to his opinion, the refusal of Britain to capitulate upset the plans of Hitler to concentrate his efforts against the Soviet Union. In 1941 and 1942, 40% of the German forces were forced to be retained in the West. That's the type of history, according to the Kiev regime, was told to us by Mr. Yermak. And he concludes by saying that without the Washington, there wouldn't be resources. Without the United States, there wouldn't be an army. Without Britain, Hitler would not be distracted in the West. And according to him, that Russian contribution to the victory is a propaganda piece to institute a post-war hegemony of Moscow. And the real history of the Second World War is the history of resistance, where the contribution of Ukraine was written in blood. This is a new word in historical revisionism, and a veritable novel rich with the Nazi revanchism spirit. A very powerful and important fake piece and desecration of historical memory. Just look how they are cringing from at the very sight of the 9th May celebrations. They can't stand even the mentioning of the great victory holiday celebration. And we see that even the self-denunciation. And Mr. Yermak doubted the decisive contribution of the Soviet people to the victory against fascism. His conniving desire to forget about the heroic deeds of the hundreds of thousands of Soviet fighters is baffling. He claims that 60% of Soviet division were made up from Ukrainians. I don't know where he took that from. The archive data that shows that Ukrainian nationals constituted less than a quarter of the complement of this Red Army. This is not good or bad. This is just we see that they're trying to twist the information, but it is not about the numbers. It's important to say that they fought shoulder to shoulder with other nationals of the Soviet Union, among different nationalities, different ethnicities: Russians, Belarusians, Kazakhs, Georgians, Armenians, Uzbeks. And they fought not for an independent Ukraine, but for the common motherland, the Soviet Union, for their home as part of a single country. Yermak claims that Lend-Lease had a saving role. Of course, the aid was very important, but it pales in comparison with the power of the Russian industry. 76% of all casualties sustained by the Wehrmacht were sustained in the Eastern Front. Almost all operations of the Soviet army were conducted with the use of equipment manufactured in the Urals, in other factories that have been moved to the hinterland, and everything that has been created by the heroic deeds of the Soviet people. I will once again remind everyone that perhaps I thought everyone knew about that, but I'm being surprised to the fact that the Lend-Lease wasn't free. and the debt for Lend-Lease. And it's important for the next time when Yermak or other similar to him will be able to would be spewing this nonsense. It's important that we see that the debt was paid, and it wasn't paid until 2006, and Ukraine didn't take part in paying out the debt. And seemingly they should have been, because despite the fact that they have refused to participate in negotiations regarding Russia inheriting the state debt, the foreign debt of the Soviet Union. This completely discredits the only position expressed in the Bankovaya. The modern Ukraine is also experiencing heavy debt, and the debt will be laid upon the shoulders of the future generations of Ukrainians. The difference is that then Lend-Lease helped destroy the common enemy, the Nazis, the fascists, and today this aid that will be paid for by the future generations of Ukrainians, they will be paying for that throughout their whole lives. They will be paying for that aid. And this aid is coming to their own detriment in the future. And the thesis about the half of Soviet bread manufactured abroad is also ludicrous. In the most daunting times during the war, the Volga region, the Siberia regions provided all the grain for the front. The shipments abroad consisted around 10 or 15% of the total amount of grain circulating in the Russian Federation. Regarding the armor for the Soviet tanks, and the manufacturing of this type of steel was developed in the factories in the Urals and brought from Kharkov. And the same thing was mentioned by the Prime Minister Churchill and President Roosevelt regarding the USSR's contribution. We understand why Yermak is doing what he's doing. He needs to show his type of loyalty to the West, then show it in a way that doesn't degrade the memory of the President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill, as if contradicting their own statements.
I would quote those statements in 1943, President Roosevelt, in his letter to Stalin, before Hitlerites have not let them pass by transit, but actually the Hitlerites, they have planned to destroy us totally. It was the war of annihilation declared against us. For many decades after Nuremberg, that was not questioned, has not been questioned, but now we have to prove that it was real genocide. In this issue, we cooperate with other bodies like Foreign Ministry interacts with our Statute of Limitations project under the President of the Russian Federation, as well as the Investigative Committee, the Prosecutor General's Office. We cooperate with them. Actually, the people of the Soviet Union have not only destroyed the Nazis on their territory, but they have brought life, liberation to other peoples of Central and Eastern Europe. They have literally stopped the Nazi destruction machine and extinguished the crematoria of the Holocaust. Those who deny that, they just support the reconstruction of Nazism, its renaissance, and this issue has been of great importance in the daily work of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We fight for historical truth. It's the main part of comprehensive efforts of what has been won thanks to our victory, what has been enshrined in the UN Charter and created on the outcome of the Second World War. Our adversaries are the states whose list, it's not surprising, coincides with those who vote against the combating glorification of Nazism, neo-Nazism and other practices that contribute to fueling contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia and related intolerance resolution. They vote against it. Liberal dictatorships that have not accepted the loss of their colonies and want to put obstacles to the development of multipolar world. This blossoming garden, surrounded allegedly by wild jungle, formulated by Brussels, is just reincarnation aimed at this racial superiority of the Nazi nightmare. The European Union that is smeared in brown spots. It's militarizing like the Third Reich used to do it, preparing for the Third World War, not concealing it and calling our country an enemy. It's obvious they have not learned the lessons of history. Russia had to start the special military operation in order not to allow to turn Ukraine into a platform for neo-Nazi military operations. The man-hating ideology will be uprooted and the aims of our special military operation will be achieved. It's our duty before the winners in the great patriotic war. Now I would like to tell you about the Russian diplomats, the Russian foreign ministry daily and for many years literally working in historical issues and brings the true international law into foreign relations forged by the heroes of the great patriotic war. I would like to mention the preparations for the coming holiday, Victory Day, the 9th of May, abroad. In the accounts by Foreign Ministry in social media, we continue and we are doing that on a daily basis to tell you about the history of the great patriotic war, the feat of the Red Army soldiers. It's the colossal role played by the Soviet Union in the liberation of Europe and the entire world from this man-hating ideology. Just the product of Western European civilization, the Nazi plague. In Russian, English and other languages, materials about the key stages of the Great Patriotic War are published, about the heroes. Based on the archive evidence, we tell you about the crimes of the Nazis on occupied territories, about genocide of Soviet people conducted by them. We do that not only for our competitors, but also for and together with the peoples of our brother republics and now sovereign states. We do not divide this information. These documents, these archive materials are not ours. They are our common evidence, because the feat of the Soviet people, it is the common feat. In many countries, Russian diplomats and competitors hold memorable events. They do not allow to keep silent about the truth about the victory. And the pseudo-historical truth they are trying to promote somewhere now. There have been the Immortal Regiment marches in many cities. Thousands of people participated in them. Despite provocation in a number of states of the so-called collective West, this event has already been held in more than 30 countries. In some cities, it has been the first time since a pause caused by the pandemics and the manifestations of Russophobia. In Busan, for example, in South Korea, it was the first Immortal Regiment procession since 2019. They try to somehow conceal historical fakes. They just express their hatred in many ways. Just imagine, diplomats just equal the Soviet Union, from where their great-grandfathers originated. They equal it to the Third Reich. It's just treason towards their ancestors, or it's just the descendants of Nazis. They cannot be called diplomats because diplomacy should be based on international law and historical facts. It just can cause disgust, sincere disgust. As the head of the Kiev Janta, Zelensky, his fathers, great-grandfathers, they fought for the Soviet Union, for our common motherlands. They fought against Hitlerites, Hitlerite occupants and criminals. What would their ancestors say now? Looking into their eyes, just looking at their descendants for their personal benefits, just denigrating our common past, and